All right, what's going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you so much for consuming the show. Whether you watch it, whether you listen, it doesn't matter. I appreciate you guys very, very much. If you have not yet subscribed to the show, please go in and do that. If you watch it on YouTube, make sure you go to the Talking Buffalo YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button for the video as well. Really helps us grow on the algorithm side of YouTube. And of course, wherever you listen to your pod, Apple, Spotify, wherever that may be, even if you watch the videos typically, make sure you follow us on the audio side as well. Really helps us continue to grow. Big shout out, both our sponsors, Sunny Reds, 1841 Aber Road, just on the way from Highmark Stadium. They got an incredible, I don't even want to say dinner special because there's an anytime food special going on right now. 20 wings, large pizza, $45. That is an awesome deal, especially when you take into account that the food is incredible. Some of the best wings anywhere in Western New York, and that brick oven pizza, that's to die for, man. It's really, really good. And it's anytime. And if for whatever reason you don't want to hang out at the bar, you can pick it up. So you don't even have to come in there, sit down, be served, and eat it. You can just get that special anytime. Of course, the patio's still going on. The weather still cooperating. Very, very nice. Brand new patio. First summer open. It is awesome. So make sure you guys get up to Sunny Reds. And then also Imperial Pizza as well. 2 locations, 1655 Main Street near Canisius College, and the South Buffalo staple, 1035 Aber Road. Imperial Pizza's got the best lunch special literally anywhere in town. An awesome place to hang out. One of the most popular pizza and wing joints in all, not just Buffalo, but Western New York, for a really good reason. People love some Imperial Pizza, and so do I. All right, folks, this is our Friday episode, which means with the Bills playing on Sunday, it's our preview episode. Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets, week 2. I'm going to have a little bit of a preview. I'm going to give you 3 keys to a Bills victory on Sunday. Going to drop 5 bold predictions on you. And ultimately, I'm going to give you a final score pick. My goal is to make this not a very long episode. I say that all the time. Usually I fail, but hopefully this will be not the case. Like I said, I don't want to keep you here forever, man. I want to respect your time and kind of get right in and out of the points. I will say one thing, though, before we get going. I'm recording this Thursday around 2 p.m. Normally, I would be recording this later in the day or even into the evening. However, I'm doing a guest spot on Sal's House with Sal Capaccio here on Thursday night. Make sure you go check that out. I hope it turned out well. I'm recording this before I do that, but make sure you go to Sal's YouTube page and check that out. I'm really looking forward to that. Should be fun. But anyway, I'm recording this a little bit earlier, and I mentioned that because literally like maybe 15 minutes or so before I went on the air to start recording this, news broke that Buffalo Bills, I'll say after week 1, stud defensive tackle Ed Oliver was seen walking around in the locker room with a walking boot and a scooter. Not ideal. Not ideal at all. We'll get to that a little bit here in the show, but I don't know, shocking. I guess it's shocking because he was fine as far as we knew on Wednesday. Something must have happened in the last 24 hours. So anyway, we'll talk about that in just a few. But to kind of set this game up a little bit, of course, the Buffalo Bills, they're coming off the high of winning a thriller. Could have an early potential game of the year in the NFL. 41-40 Highmark Stadium over the Ravens to open up the season 1-0. Without question, this is the final season at Highmark Stadium, and that was one of maybe the best opener ever there. Joe from Queens was on yesterday, and the only game at the time, and that I still could think of that might rival that, you'd have to go all the way back to 1980 when the Buffalo Bills beat the Miami Dolphins. Not that the game itself was a thriller, but the impact and the significance of that game, because that was the game that ended a decade drought. The Buffalo Bills, if you're young and you don't know this, the Buffalo Bills went 0 for the entire 1970s, a decade where they could not beat the Miami Dolphins. They did so, though, home opener 1980, and fans literally stormed the field, tore the goalpost down. That's how much that game meant to the Bills and Bills fans back at that time. But anyway, a great start for the Bills by beating Baltimore, who I still say 1-53, probably the best roster in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Jets come in 0-1. They lost. I'll tell you what, it was a thriller, too. They lost to Pittsburgh 34-32. Were it not for the Buffalo-Baltimore Sunday night game, you can make a very fair argument that the Pittsburgh Jets game was the best game of week one. So the Bills are favored by 7 points coming in. I wonder if Ed Oliver news moves that needle at all. But as of this recording anyway, the Bills are favored by 7. The over-under for this game is 46.5. And it's on CBS. And you're going to get your first dose, by the way. Jim Nantz, Tony Romo on the call, Tracy Wolfson on the sideline. So if you care about that type of thing, the Bills are going to get the CBS A-team for that. In terms of the New York Jets, all right, like I said, they lost a close game to Pittsburgh last week, 34-32. The big story as it relates to the Buffalo Bills anyway, and the Bills' struggles at stopping the Ravens' running game, the Bills' struggles at stopping the running game for most of last season as well, is that New York ran the ball fantastically against a good Pittsburgh Steelers front. And they were committed to running the football as well, the Jets. First-year coach Aaron Glenn, you could tell right away they want to establish an identity on offense, and a lot of that has to do with running the football. They ran the ball 39 times against Pittsburgh. 182 yards they got on the ground as well. 4.7 yards per carry. And to me, the number that pops the most is the 39 carries. Like, this is a Jets team that in week one was extremely committed to running the football, protecting the football, and I absolutely see that continuing here in week two against Buffalo, especially when they're watching the film and they see the success that the Ravens had, of course, led by Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. It feels like the Jets with Justin Fields and Hall and Allen, it's kind of like, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but like Ravens light. Like, those are good players too, and they run the football well. Maybe not as quite as good as a Lamar Jackson or as a Derrick Henry, but those are some really, really good players. And speaking of Justin Fields, he had a real good game, a real strong start to his Jets career against, again, what I consider a pretty strong Pittsburgh Steelers defense. He completed 16 of 22 passes for 218 yards and a touchdown. He also ran 12 times for 48 yards and a pair of scores. Had a really nice play action on fourth down to kind of waltz into the end zone on one play late in the game. He is a legitimate dual threat. And he's always been that way, but it's been more so about running, I think, than passing throughout his career. But again, it's just one game with the Jets. But I thought, and I watched a lot of that game too, I thought he threw the ball very well. Pittsburgh blitzed him minimally. I think they blitzed it 8 times. And the Jets and Fields made him pay. He went 5 for 6 for 66 yards and a touchdown when facing the blitz. So Justin Fields, a really good start. Breece Hall, who was the subject of a lot of offseason and summer trade rumors, had a really good debut for the Jets this week one. Played about 58% of the snaps, which off the top of my head, I think that's right around what James Cook played for the Bills as well. But anyway, 58% of the snaps, and he racked up 145 scrimmage yards, including 107 rushing. So a real good game for him. Braylon Allen is kind of a thumper inside between the tackles, short yardage. He could do some damage as well. This is a team that has some pretty good skill position players. And Breece Hall's done a lot of damage against the Buffalo Bills in the past as well. In terms of receivers, it's right now, at least anyway, it's pretty much about one guy. And of course, that guy is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson caught seven balls, 9 targets, 95 yards. He had a touchdown. 45% target share. So literally when they threw the ball, 45% of the time, almost half of the time, it was going to Garrett Wilson, who again had a really good game. A tough play at the very end. The Jets' last grasp is 4th down, 4th and 2. Justin Fields, you can argue, should have took off and tried to run for it. Saw Wilson open, hit him, but just as the ball hit him, Jalen Ramsey had a perfectly timed hit for Pittsburgh and knocked the ball loose. And ultimately, that's why, or how, in part, that the Jets lost. But anyway, Garrett Wilson was out there literally 100% of the snaps. 100%. He was out there for every play of the game for the Jets. There were only 2 receivers in around the NFL that played every snap for their offense. The other one, Justin Jefferson from Minnesota. Anyway, the only other wide receiver for the Jets to even see a target in week 1 was Josh Reynolds. So it was pretty much Garrett Wilson or bust when it came to the wide receivers. First round rookie, right tackle, Armin Mambu did really well in his debut. He allowed just 1 pressure on 26 pass blocking reps. And again, I'll remind you, this Pittsburgh Steelers is a pretty sound defense. You know, somebody named TJ Watt plays on this team. Someone named Cameron Hayward is on that defensive line. Highsmith. They got a lot of talent on that team. And the Jets offensively especially really held their own. And so did the first round rookie. It was the left side of the line that really struggled in pass protection. Myers and Simpson each gave up 4 pressures. Last year's first round pick, the left tackle, Fashanu, gave up 6 pressures. So it was a bad game for him. Other side of the ball, defense. The good news is they did sack Aaron Rodgers 4 times. Will McDonald had 2 sacks. Sauce Gardner was great in coverage on DK Metcalf. When he was on DK Metcalf did very little damage. DK did his damage on the other side, which Brandon Stevens struggled. Michael Carter really struggled. And they allowed Aaron Rodgers 22 of 30 against them, 244 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So when it came to the pass defense, the Jets stunk. They were not good at all. But they were good at stopping the run. I don't really know how committed Pittsburgh was to running the football. Probably not as committed as we will see from the Bills this weekend. But anyway, Pittsburgh got just 2.7 yards per carry when it came to running the football. In terms of the Bills stuff, let's get to that before we catch a break here. Like I said, we're going to start with some breaking news as of this recording. Anyway, Ed Oliver, after being not on the injury report Wednesday when the media was there, popped up with a did not participate. And afterwards, a lot of reporters saw him in the locker room with a walking boot on. I believe it was his left ankle. I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. It was a walking boot on his ankle and a scooter to get around. A couple reporters pointed out that they saw him playing, I think it was ping pong, and he wasn't on the scooter for that, and he was standing on the walking boot. But when he went from point A to point B, he got back on the scooter. Obviously, this is very suboptimal. You can make a case that other than Josh Allen, Ed Oliver was the best player on the field for the Buffalo Bills in that opener against the Ravens. Ed Oliver had a very strong case for being AFC Defensive Player of the Week. He's hurt already. That's not great, and especially not great considering that the 2 rookie defensive tackles, albeit, in a very tough situation against a very elite football team, had what we will generously call rough debuts. Now, I don't want to speculate too much about an Ed Oliver injury. However, for him to be in a walking boot on Thursday, I don't think it takes an injury expert, and I don't think I'm digging too hard to or reaching too much to say I think his status for at least this Sunday very well could be in doubt. Injuries aren't always the same, but what I will say is that Khalil Shakir, after the blue and red scrimmage early in training camp, was in a walking boot and a scooter to get around, and ultimately he ended up missing 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, it was camps, and we don't know when he could have played. He didn't miss any games, of course. He was out there last week and played well. But this could be a multiple week injury. By the time most of you are listening to this, depending on when you're listening to this, Sean McDermott speaks on Friday mornings to Sal Capaccio on WGR. So maybe we will get an update. We won't get a timeline, I'm sure, but if he's not playing on Sunday and that's official, you might already know that by the time you listen to that. So obviously this is terrible news for a Bills defense that really struggled as a whole to begin with against Baltimore, and now potentially to be without the guy who was clearly their best player. Very not good. A little bit of good news. Teron Johnson, who missed practice on Wednesday with a quad, who was do not participate, was limited on Thursday. So that's good news for him. Greg Rizzo has a knee. He was limited for a second straight day. From what I hear, indications are he sounds pretty good to play. Also of note on the injury front, Jordan Hancock, who was not on the injury report for Wednesday, was limited on Thursday. And that was with the shoulder again. So I don't know, man. Some of these injuries starting to pile up. I thought that Jordan Hancock would have a chance to play on Sunday if Teron Johnson doesn't play, but it certainly sounds like Teron Johnson, well, at least he's trending in the right direction by going from DNP to limited. One other note, James Cook, hamstring injury, was limited on Wednesday. I saw a report from NFL reporter Kimberly Martin, who said she talked to James Cook and he's playing. He said he's playing. So I wouldn't worry too much about James Cook not being out there on Sunday. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's take a real quick break, come back on the other side. A few more things about the Bills, then we'll get into keys to victory, bowl predictions, and a score prediction as well. All right, we are back here talking Bills, Jets coming up this Sunday, 1 p.m. Like I said, Jim Nantz, Tony Romo, Tracy Wolfson on the call. The Bills coming off that historic win Sunday at Highmark Stadium, and Josh Allen did what, everything you hoped he could be and more. That's what he was on Sunday. It's days later, 4.5 days later, and I'm still marveling at what he did. 261 yards, 3 total touchdowns in the fourth quarter. He picked up his 16th career AFC Offensive Player of the Week. Just incredible stuff from Josh Allen. Coming into this game, I'll say this too about the Bills. The natural instinct is for them to guard against a letdown. I don't think Sean McDermott will let that happen. This is a trademark of the Buffalo Bills. They beat the teams that they're supposed to be. And even if this was headed towards being a letdown, I'd be willing to bet that the Ed Oliver injury is going to turn around, that at least that overconfidence, if it wasn't already turned around immediately. I think this is an organization that says the right things, and I do think they legitimately have plenty of respect for the New York Jets. Sean McDermott talked about on Wednesday how Aaron Glenn is kind of building things from the ground up, and it reminded him of the way Sean McDermott did it when he came to Buffalo. Now, of course, they ain't got Josh Allen wearing green and white out there, so that makes a wee bit of a difference, but you get the point fundamentally how the Jets are building and what that they want to be. In terms of the Bills' passing game this first week, it went about as good as anybody could hope for, realistically, if you're the Buffalo Bills. Keon Coleman, breakout game right off the gate. 8 catches, $112, a touchdown. Shakir, 6 catches, 64 yards. Josh Palmer, 5 for 61. Dalton Kincaid, 4 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. 2 of those catches were huge, by the way. James Cook had a 51-yard catch and beautiful run. That's how you draw it up. Going into this game, if you said, this is how I want my passing game to be, that is exactly how you would draw it up, which is a good thing because the run game struggled a little bit. 31 carries. They averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Ty Johnson had a nice 17-yard run. James Cook had an 11-yarder. But that was about it for the running game. Not very good against a very good defense, but that's okay. Defensively, like I said, they stunk. They mostly stunk in that football game, other than Ed Oliver, who was, I thought, sensational. Arguably, and I'm not arguing it, the best game of the best game of his career. That's how good he was, man. But I'll say this. When, I say the defense for the most part stunk. I don't want to be an apologist for this defense. I don't want to sound like a homer. I don't want to, just kind of sweep under the rug the fact that they were, for 3+ quarters, absolutely, positively lousy. And I mean lousy. And again, not to make excuses, but I'm going to cut them at least a tiny bit of slack. Not because, or not just because, I should say, that they played against a great offense, led by two of the best players in all of football in Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. But I also think, to some extent, that what we saw from the Bills defense in week 1 was a product of a little bit of rust, not enough reps, barely any reps at all in the preseason. I mean, the starters on defense, I think they played one series in the opener for the entire preseason. That's it. There were guys that missed part of camp, a good part of camp, with injuries, namely the middle linebacker, Terrell Bernard, who was out a couple weeks with a hamstring. Both starting safeties missed significant time. Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop, Christian Benford missed a couple days of practice the week before going into this opener. So I do think that missed time and injuries, it played at least some form of role here, okay? And then you get 2 rookie defensive tackles in TJ Sanders and Deion Walker. It was their first game on a very big stage, and they made some mistakes, again, against a great team. Now, I will not, so we're clear, give them any sort of pass going forward, even if Ed Oliver is out for an extended period of time. There is enough money and resources sunk into this unit that it needs to be better than it was against the Baltimore Ravens, because that was lousy. But I do think it's worth mentioning that there are at least somewhat of a few valid reasons on why maybe it was. We'll find out a lot more about this defense when they match up Sunday in New Jersey against the New York Jets. The edges struggled with contain. That was on glowing display against Baltimore. I do think the fare of Derrick Henry between the tackles, you got to get him going before, or you got to get him stopped before he gets going. I do think that's why maybe in part they got caught a few times. So the edges struggled. Just the defensive tackles really struggled with, other than Ed Oliver, getting moved around, getting stood up, over pursuing quickly, and then getting trapped. You saw that a handful of times on film. I thought the linebackers struggled something fierce with everything, surprisingly. And then, of course, the safeties. Taylor Rapp, particular absolute nightmare. It was a nightmare football game for Taylor Rapp. So you have all that. Getting to the 3 keys to the football game here for the Buffalo Bills. 3 keys I got, at least anyway. And there's more. I could probably run off 6 or 7 easily, but I try to limit this to 3 each week. Number 1, don't let Quinn Williams have one of those dominant days. Let me give you an example here. Ed Oliver, this first game against the Baltimore Ravens. If you're the Baltimore Ravens right now and you're projected into your next preview, one of your keys would be, don't let Ed Oliver have one of those dominant days, because that's exactly what he did. Baltimore scored 40 points. They might have scored 55 points were it not for Ed Oliver. And I'm not exaggerating either, by the way, because the Bills on defense, other than Ed Oliver, were pretty much helpless. Even all the big plays that shaped the game were literally Ed Oliver. The the sack on the first drive that forced Baltimore to settle for a field goal instead of scoring a touchdown in all likeliness. Of course, the fumble, the Derrick Henry fumble, that was the turning point of the game. Again, that was Ed Oliver. Baltimore punting on 4th and 3, and we showed this on film earlier in the week. Baltimore punting on 4th and 3, I still say was a product of Ed Oliver, and you can see it on film, absolutely demolishing Lamar Jackson. I didn't see it personally, but I heard someone say, or multiple people say, that Lamar was talking about having cramps. He was cramping afterwards before that 4th down play. I bet you he got his bell rung by Ed Oliver. So anyway, I turn this now to Quinnen Williams because he is that type of player. He's very capable. Don't let him have one of those dominant days. There's a handful of interior defensive linemen in the league capable of disrupting an entire offense, the flow of an entire offense. Quinnen Williams is one of them. He's one of the best in the league. So the Bills' interior offensive linemen, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, David Edwards, they are going to have their hands full with them. The defensive line as a whole is pretty good. Again, McDonald had 2 sacks in week 1. Jermaine Johnson, a former first-round pick on the edge. Harrison Phillips, old friend, is back, started at defensive tackle alongside Williams as well. So, the less prominent you allow that Jets front four to be, especially Quinnen Williams, I think this is a defense, unlike Baltimore, that's kind of stacked at all 3 levels, even though the Bills had a lot of success. But this Jets defense, at least to me on paper, I think once you get past the front 4, other than Sauce, I think the weaker the defense gets throughout. I also think that the Jets' defensive line is not that great. Certainly not deep like Buffalo's, for example. So, if I'm Joe Brady and I want to kind of make Quinnen Williams maybe a little bit less of a factor, maybe I'm going to run a little more up-tempo, faster-paced play calling and get these guys tired quicker. But again, Quinnen Williams is an absolute stud, a potential game wrecker. Don't let him ruin your afternoon. Number 2, I mentioned Sauce briefly here. Sauce Gardner is going to be on one side. I don't know. He'll probably be on Keon Coleman plenty. But again, the Bills don't have a true number 1 receiver, so I don't know that. But here's what I am saying. Josh is a smart football player now. He's very cerebral. Expose whoever Sauce Gardner is not covering. That's my second key right now. At its core, football is a very simple game. You find the weakness and you attack the weakness. And that's what the Bills need to do in the passing game. Go after whoever it is. If it's the Buffalo Bills, Christian Benford is a lockdown corner. Dorian Strong, Trey White, not so much. And we don't know who's going to be starting. I personally, right now, as I record this, I think all signs are pointing to Trey White getting back in the starting lineup because I think he's going to be healthy enough to play. But anyway, my point is, you could bet your ass Justin Fields and the Jets passing game, they're going to go after Trey White or Dorian Strong, whoever that is, a lot more than Benford. It should be that way. That's the way it should be. The Bills should be making Brandon Stevens show that he can handle that task. Ditto for Michael Carter as well. All right. Now, I'm not very scared of their safety combo either. Tony Adams, Andre Sisco, they're not bad, but they're not world beaters to me either. So, as much fun as it would be to beat Sauce Gardner, and I'm not saying stay away from him for 60 minutes either, just so we're clear. But predominantly, you want to go after the weakness. Sauce Gardner is the strength of that secondary. Expose whoever else is out there that's name is not Sauce Gardner. So that's 2. And then number 3, I just mentioned this briefly a few minutes ago. Need to see a bounce back game from the Bills linebackers. I've talked about it all week. I thought Matt Milano, after having a fantastic summer, was very pedestrian, very average against the Ravens. Terrell Bernard, quite frankly, I thought he was terrible against Baltimore. Swallowed up all over the place, uncharacteristically out of position a lot. He switched from 43 to 8, and I swear to you, I thought there were times where I'm like, well, Taylor Rapp just made a mistake. Oh, it was Terrell Bernard. He struggled really, really, really badly. The Bills linebackers are very important, and they're a lot better than what we saw against Baltimore. So I think the third key for me is simply seeing Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard play up to what their standards are. All right, 5 bold predictions for this game. I'm going to drop these on you relatively quickly. One of them I just mentioned, Matt Milano. Bold prediction, he gets a sack. Matt Milano's going to get his first sack. Actually, take that back. Matt Milano's going to get a sack for a second consecutive game. Matt Milano didn't play well against Baltimore, but he was credited for a sack. So let's say the bold prediction, I just thought of that in my head, by the way. The bold prediction is the sack streak continues. I just envisioned in my head Justin Fields trying to scramble, Matt Milano tracking him down for a sack. So I'm going to go Matt Milano sack is 1. 2, Ty Johnson bounces back from a quiet opener, including dropping a touchdown. Ty Johnson is going to score a touchdown for the Bills in this football game. 3, I got to have at least one negative against the Bills, and here it is. Breece Hall is going to break at least one long run of 40 yards or more in this football game. Prediction 4, the Bills are going to hold Justin Fields under 200 passing yards, which, to be honest with you, I don't know. Is that bold? You let me know. I think it's semi-bold. But anyway, the Bills are going to hold Justin Fields under 200 yards. And here's the last one. And I feel like this is pretty bold. Curtis Samuel is going to not only make his season debut after being a healthy and active last week, but I think he's going to be active this week, and I think he's going to score a touchdown. So there you go. Ty Johnson touchdown. The Bills hold Justin Fields under 200. Matt Milano gets a sack for a second straight week. Breece Hall, at least one run of 40 or more yards. And Curtis Samuel plays and scores a touchdown. All right, last thing here. Final prediction. I think the Jets undoubtedly, as they should, are going to try to emulate and copy the way the Baltimore Ravens played offense. I think you're going to see tons of read options from Justin Fields. I think they're going to go to Garrett Wilson early and often, as they should. I think the Bills offensively, I'm sure of this, they plan on running the football more effectiveness, more success than Pittsburgh did, a little more balance. Who, again, Pittsburgh had just 53 rushing yards on 20 carries. So, no, I was wrong about that. Yeah, I am right about that. What the hell I'm saying? Anyway, Pittsburgh did not run the football. They relied on Aaron Rodgers, and they had enough success. But I think the Bills didn't like the way they ran the football against Baltimore. I think they're going to make a concerted effort to run the ball more balanced and effectively, and I think they're going to. Ultimately, and admittedly, though, because, again, these were my thoughts pre-learning about Ed Oliver, but even with him possibly, maybe likely, or not for sure out, ultimately, I think this is a game for the Bills defense to bounce back. At least some, anyway. Like, I don't think they're going to hold the Jets to 6 points. I'm not suggesting that. But I also don't see they're not going to give up 40 points like they did against Baltimore. I expect Bernard and Milano to have a much stronger showing against Baltimore. I think Greg Rizzo and Joey Bosa are going to make a few plays after being relatively quiet against the Ravens, especially Greg Rizzo, who, other than a deflected Lamar Jackson pass, quite frankly, really didn't do anything in the opener. I expect things to be different with those guys here in week 2. Even with Ed Oliver likely out, I think the defensive tackles had a good learning experience in week 1, and TJ Sanders and Deion Walker will combine to give you a lot more than what we saw in week 1. And by the way, if Ed is out, that would mean Jordan Phillips will be up, so he'll be a factor in that defensive tackle rotation as well. But look, Ed Oliver, if he's hurt and he's out, this is why you go get a TJ Sanders. This is why you trade up in the second round to go get a TJ Sanders. This is why you trade up in the 4th round and you double down and you go get a Deion Walker. The depth on this team is early, but they're going to get tested. And I think the interior part of the Jets offensive line is not great. So I think this is a good opportunity for these defensive tackles, these young guys, to do some good things. The Jets are definitely going to present some problems. This has been a pretty talented team for a while now, man. I honestly think the Jets' biggest problem over the last couple of years is how poorly they were coached. And I think Aaron Rodgers was an awful signing for them, not just so much even on the field, but I just don't think the chemistry that he jived with the organization and his teammates on or off the field. But I think this is a pretty good football team. I expect a competitive game, but ultimately, I see Buffalo getting a better defensive effort, maybe a turnover or two to put it away. So, final pick, I'm going to go Bills 30, Jets 19. So, Bills 30, Jets 19. There you have it. I don't think I'm doing a bonus show on Saturday, but stay tuned just in case. Make sure you're following me on socials, which is at Patrick Moran TV for Twitter, for Instagram as well. What I do know for certain is we're going to be live Sunday night, 9 p.m., not right after the game, 9 p.m. This year, 1 o'clock games and 4:25 games. We're going to be going Sunday live, 9 p.m. Joe from Queens will be joining me for that. Primetime games, we go on 10, 15 minutes right after the game. Of course, next week, the Bills short turnaround at home against Miami in week 3. But anyway, next show, Sunday, 9 p.m., Joe from Queens. We'll put a spin. We'll put a recap on this Bills-Jets game. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, for listening. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you Sunday night.